The grand lecture hall floated in the void of space, its structure defying conventional architecture. Dozens of alien species sat in tiered rows, their forms varying wildly, some crystalline, others gelatinous, a few encased in biomechanical exoskeletons. Each was among the brightest minds of their civilizations, selected for their unparalleled intelligence. At the front of the hall stood Professor Xel'virs, an ancient being with an elongated, translucent skull that pulsed faintly with thought. His reputation was legend, his lessons even more so. Today, he had something special for his students. Throughout the millennia, this question has remained unsolved. Xel'virs' voice resonated through the chamber. A riddle that no species, no intelligence, has been able to answer. Perhaps today, one of you will succeed. The students leaned forward. Some activated secondary thought processors. Others linked their minds in collective problem-solving networks. The tension was palpable. Xel'virs allowed a dramatic pause before continuing. What can be measured, but has no substance? What exists only in perception, yet defines all things? The question hung in the air like a gravitational singularity. The first responses came instantly. The concept of mass without physicality, proposed to Xel'virs, its tendrils twitching with anticipation. A probability matrix describing uncertainty, theorized to Vortan, its 6 eyes narrowing in deep calculation. A waveform existing in potentiality rather than state, offered a synthy unit, its circuits humming. Xel'virs remained silent, watching as more attempts flooded in. Each answer was logical, precise, well-founded in advanced theory. And yet, every one of them missed the mark. A murmur rippled through the hall as the failed attempts stacked higher. Frustration crept in. Some students furiously recalibrated their approaches. Others exchanged knowing glances, believing that if no greater intelligence had solved this before, the answer must be unknowable. At the back of the hall, Daniel Carter sat quietly, arms crossed. He was the only human present, an oddity among beings who viewed his kind as intellectually inferior. Humans were adaptable, yes, but they lacked the raw computational power of a Synthor or the perfect logic of a Xel'virs. They were considered unpredictable, prone to impulsiveness and flawed reasoning. Daniel exhaled, suppressing a smirk. He already knew the answer. It was obvious. The aliens were overcomplicating the question, applying layers of unnecessary abstraction. He considered speaking but hesitated. Let them struggle a little longer. Daniel stretched his arms, exhaling as if the whole exercise had been a waste of time. Then, with a casual shrug, he spoke. The answer is time. The entire hall fell into absolute silence. No murmurs, no recalculations, just stunned stillness. Dozens of brilliant minds, capable of unraveling the fabric of reality itself, now sat frozen. Xel'virs tilted his head slightly, observing the reactions. A Vortan's 6 eyes darted back and forth, mentally testing the answer against their vast internal databases. A Xel'virs' tendrils spasmed involuntarily as its logical frameworks collapsed under the realization. The Synthor collective went entirely still, their processing halted, locked in a paradox error. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Think about it, he continued, his tone almost bored. Time can be measured, but it has no substance. It exists only in perception. Different species experience it in different ways. And yet, it defines everything. Without time, nothing progresses, nothing changes. Every action, every thought, every event, it all depends on time. Xel'virs let the weight of the answer settle over the room. His translucent skull pulsed in slow, deliberate waves. Fascinating, he finally said. The aliens, still struggling to process, shifted uncomfortably. The Xel'virs, who prided themselves on their flawless logic, had missed something so simple. The Vortans, whose species had mapped the curvature of space-time itself, had failed to recognize the fundamental principle behind it. The Synthor collective, with computational resources vast enough to simulate entire galaxies, had been outmaneuvered by a single human mind. Daniel didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The stunned silence was enough. Xel'virs studied him for a moment, then spoke again, his voice tinged with something unreadable. "And tell me, Daniel Carter, how long did it take you to find this answer?" Daniel smirked. "Instantly. For the first time in centuries," Xeric laughed.